blockbuster movies during the 1950s.
A kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Even more so, going on dates with the American president and honorably meeting with Queen Elizabeth II. But what became a surprisingly success story took a dark turn when Marilyn became mentally ill, causing her to give up her daughter to foster care. To make matters worse, Marilyn would go on to face several divorces, sexual abuse, the humiliation of producers, drug addiction, and several miscarriages, forcing her to keep a bright smile in front of the world, which only added to her untimely death in the end. Her tragic story is a series of deep longing for love, a constant struggle to prove her worth beyond her beauty, which made me ask, was the price of fame too high? Was Marilyn Monroe truly happy? What truly led to her sudden death? This is the extremely heartbreaking story of the woman who became an icon but never found peace, Marilyn Monroe.
What makes you so sad? I think you're the saddest girl I ever met.
The first man never said that. I'm usually told how happy I am.
Embarking on its second war. Amidst of this was when the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, was born, and also the year Norma Jean Baker was born, who would go on to become Marilyn Monroe years to come. Norma Jean Mortensen was born on June 1st, 1926, to Gladys Baker and her illicit lover, Stanley Gifford, who left while Gladys was pregnant, leading Norma to take her mother's surname, Barker.
Marilyn Monroe was born June 1st, 1926. She was an illegitimate baby, and her mother, Gladys Baker, was uncertain of who the father was. On her birth certificate, Marilyn was Norma Jean Mortensen, but she grew up as Norma Jean Baker.
Being born in Los Angeles, it seemed like Norma Jean grew up in the shadows of Hollywood, but there was one ingredient missing, and that was a stable home of love. As if living without her father wasn't worse, Gladys began showing signs of mental illness when Norma was just 8 years old, physically abusing her daughter, and later suffered a mental breakdown in January 1934 that led Norma running out of the home to seek for help. Gladys was admitted to a mental facility, forcing her to put her daughter in the care of her best friend, Grace Goddard, who offered to legally adopt her.
The thing she didn't have is a permanent home, and she didn't have a permanent family because her mother was her only family, and her mother, unfortunately, was committed to an institution for most of Marilyn's early life.
But as the years rolled by, Grace could no longer afford to care for her and took her to the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society. Imagine losing your mother to an illness, not knowing who your father was, no family or siblings, and ending up in an orphanage. Oh, poor Norma Jean. However, in the following 4 years, Norma Jean's search for a permanent home would only get worse and worse when she lived with different foster families, distant relatives, and family friends.
And the gates of the studios right there, and to have that dream to hold on to when she was feeling so ugly and her clothes were scratchy and she had to wash dishes for hours every night. She felt like little Cinderella, you know?
I used to sit up in the window and cry because I'd look over and I'd see RKO, and I knew my mother had worked there. She'd been a cutter there.
Around the same time, Norma was assaulted by one of her foster parents. She revealed in an interview about a certain man who called her into his room one night, locked the door, and then said, "Now you can't escape." From that incident, Norma was left with a stutter that would stay with her for a long time. In 1938, while Jean was a high school student, she moved in with Grace's aunt Anna Lower, finding a place to call home. It was here her foster parents frequently sent her to the movies to get the young girl out of their way, and with every trip she spent in front of the big screen, she was increasingly immersed in dreams of the magical world of movies, spending all her pocket money on going to the cinema.
She wanted to work really, really hard at doing something that she had a chance of succeeding in. And growing up in Hollywood, she was right here in the middle of all of that. And I think that's really...
She turned 15. Monroe found herself in a difficult situation. Now, if you've been enjoying this story, click the subscribe button to not miss out on any stories about women in history, and let's get back to the story. She could no longer be supported by her guardians because they had to move to another state. To escape returning to the orphanage, Monroe married her neighbor, whom she had been dating for some time, James Dougherty, who was 5 years older than her.
Grace were moving to Huntington, West Virginia, where Doc was being transferred. And Norma Jean was going to have to go back to an orphanage. Grace told this to my mother. And she was a little big for an orphanage, so my mother and Grace decided it might be a good idea if Norma Jean and I got married.
She was cute, she was sweet. War is coming, who knows what's going to be happening. A lot of people were marrying very quickly at the time. So Marilyn marries basically her next door neighbor.
After the wedding, Norma Jean stopped attending classes and became a housewife. She felt out of place with Dougherty and was bored by their relationship. The longer her marriage with James lasted, the more distant her acting career dreams were. However, when Dougherty was sent to fight in the Pacific in April 1944 as the World War II approached, Norma Jean relocated to live with her husband's parents and shortly after began working at the radio plane company. But little did she know this decision was about to change her life. Here, Monroe got her big break when a photographer visited the factory and had pictures of the young women there taken. The photographer discovered Norma's beauty, and he took her first photograph, and this Monroe was her mother's maiden name. Although the studio initially didn't see her potential, this made her not land a single role in her first 6 months and spent her time learning about acting. Eventually, the studio recognized her unique appeal, and in 1948, she had her first uncut movie role in Dangerous Years.
Hi, Evie.
Hi, small change.
Then Asphalt Jungle was released starring Marilyn Monroe.
What's the big idea standing there staring at me, Uncle Lon?
Don't call me Uncle Lon.
Then 3 films were released in 1953. The noir Niagara, the musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, where she sang the iconic Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend.
A kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend.
And the romantic comedy How to Marry a Millionaire.
You admit that all you're after is money.
No, I don't. Aren't you funny? Don't you know that a man being rich is like a girl being pretty? You might not marry a girl just because she's pretty, but my goodness, doesn't it help?
Then came the 1955 film The 7-Year Itch, where she acted her famous white dress scene.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway?
Marilyn wasn't just handed stardom, she fought for it. However, no matter how famous she got, Marilyn could never quite escape the shadows of her past. Her confidence was paper thin. The Norma Jean within her was constantly at war with the Marilyn Monroe the world wanted. It wasn't long before Marilyn realized that if life wasn't going to give her a Hollywood ending, she'd have to write it herself. A trademark makeup look and a trademark style, complete with her platinum hair, made Marilyn recognizable as the blonde bombshell.
Why do they always look like unhappy rabbits?
Because that's what they are. I've got to make him happy.
The dumb blonde image, I'm not sure where that came from, but maybe this movie that she did with Cary Grant, in which she played a secretary.
All right, now say terrify.
Terrified.
Now say tissue.
Tissue.
Now say them both fast together.
Terrified tissue? No! How dare you!
And she agreed to pose naked for photographer Tom Kelly in exchange for $50, which she needed for a car payment. After Monroe's movie career took off the following year, the photos and the merchandise they were printed on became famous. In 1953, aspiring publisher Hugh Hefner bought the rights to one of the photos and published it in his new magazine, Playboy. According to the Washington Post, Monroe later said, "I never even received a thank you from all those who made millions off a nude Marilyn photograph." Although it turns out the photos being published ultimately boosted Marilyn's dying career. Later that year, she entered into a relationship relationship with Joe DiMaggio, who was among the most well-known athletes of the time. After engaging in a long-distance romance on January 14, 1954,
Why do you believe there was a cover-up?
I think that her death had political implications, particularly in Washington with the Kennedys.
Monroe remains one of the most famous and recognizable figures in history and a true legend of cinema.
Everything you want to buy with Marilyn Monroe on it is out there. Lunch boxes, you name it. She's still as hot as she ever was as a piece of merchandising, as a business. Marilyn Monroe will never die.
In 1999, the American Film Institute listed her 6th on its ranking of the most important female screen icons from the golden age of Hollywood. In 2022, Kim Kardashian attended the 2022 Met Gala in an iconic Marilyn Monroe dress, the same one the movie star wore in 1962 when she wished President John F. Kennedy a happy birthday. Despite her tumultuous life, her legacy is finally starting to move beyond the dumb blonde stereotype that Hollywood so carefully crafted. When acting or her movies that makes her the Hollywood icon, it is the fact that her life is a rags to riches story and that she was born, bred, worked, and died tragically in Hollywood. The true tragedy of her life is that she was a complicated, fragile, yet determined person who quickly found fame, but never quite found true love or stability. I have a playlist already made for you to watch next after this, from the tragic story of Megan Thee Stallion to the fall of Doja Cat and the sad story of Cassie Ventura. Click on the thumbnail on screen and go watch that now. Thank you for watching this video till the end. I will see you in the next video in a second.